Hey everyone, happy Lent. We hope you're doing amazing. Here in this time of Eucharistic renewal, we're featuring some Eucharistic videos to inspire us from parishioners in their stories of how they fell in love with the Eucharist. We encourage you, have a good night everyone, to follow along with us. We're not featuring this guy today. We're not featuring this amazing seminarian. We're featuring in on Jennie Punswick. So be sure to listen in and follow right now. So we're so excited to be here with Jennie Punswick, our amazing and longtime parishioner, host of pretty much everything at the parish, but it also has this beautiful ministry now with marriage and family life. As we're into the season of Lent and looking at the Eucharist, we take this turn first to understand who this person of Jesus is. Mm-hmm. Do you have a time or a moment maybe you could look back at your life and remember when you were struck with just the power in awe of who Jesus was?
Yeah. I was raised as a cradle Catholic, right? So I was raised in a home with a lot of natural virtue. We were culturally Catholic too, as part of my grandparents and great grandparents and where they came from. So the person of Jesus, as I knew him growing up, had always been very present in traditions, right? And in ritual and in understanding who this man was that connected the way that all of our relationships worked, right? So he really became the center of everything, like the center of our family, the center of our celebrations, the center of our calendar. Of course, I couldn't have articulated this growing up. It's just reflecting on that. So understanding that Jesus, the person of Jesus, is the center of all reality was fundamental in my growing up, now that I could look back on it, right? His birthday, his crucifixion, his resurrection, all of these things that were so tied into everything that we did as a family was so important. Really, as I understood who Jesus was, or who Jesus is, and how I came to understand him in relationship, really happened for me as a college student. And I don't think my story is all that different from a lot of people who move away, right, from their families, this reality of all this togetherness. And then I found myself in college where my parents, I didn't move away, they did. They moved across the country, and I stayed and went to school here in Kansas. And all of a sudden, my parents weren't waking me up for Mass on Sunday. And I was celebrating the liturgical calendar with a group of people that I had chosen in friendship, right? And I came to understand who Jesus is in that point through the Eucharist in a greater understanding that's still a mystery, right? That I'm still learning to understand, but how Jesus is present in the Eucharist and what a Eucharistic worldview, how the Eucharist works in time. So how I could be with my family when they weren't present, but I could be with them in the Eucharist. That is still a tremendous mystery to me as an adult now, where I have a child who's off in college, right? And I have people I've loved and lost who are in heaven, that I can then see them in the Eucharist. So this idea, this reality of all of time, not like I see it through human eyes, and not place as I see it through human eyes, but how they're all condensed in the Eucharist, in the person of Jesus, is, I began to sort of understand that when I was in college. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question.
But so good, seeing that reality of making this personal as your own liturgical life in the love of the Lord. I know so often we get to journey with people as they read the Gospels. You, with your teachers, you help teach throughout the Archdiocese with the Silos Institute, as well as your own children as they're coming to understand. Do you have any favorite moments from the periods when the disciples are like struggling to understand or comprehend who really Jesus is?
Yeah.
And there's just like this powerful moment of Jesus, and they're struck with this new mystery of who he is.
Yeah. So I love the road to Emmaus. I love the road to Emmaus. I love this moment where the two people are walking. They've been walking for a long time, and they're back and forth discussing really who is Jesus, right? And like what just happened. And the stranger shows up on the scene and says, "What are you talking about?" And the language that's used in the gospel, in Luke's gospel, is, they murmured among themselves, which is the same kind of language that we hear about the Israelites in Exodus. This sort of scandal, really, of like, wait, is he who he said he was? Hang on, what's going on here? And I love how patient Jesus is with them in this moment, that he just walks and he listens to them question, and Jesus asks them, "Well, what are you talking about? What? You haven't heard?" And his patience and not rushing in right away, but listening to them. In the gospel, the gospel says that they are, and Jesus tells them that you're slow of heart, and how patient the Lord is with them in this. And, obviously, the story, right? They continue, and Jesus opens up and tells them everything about himself, all the way back from Moses. And, but they still don't get it. Like, they still don't get it. And Jesus is still so patient with them. And they invite him in, and, the gospel tells us that he indicates that Jesus would have continued to walk had they not invited him in. And so this idea of hospitality, which is a conversation we're always having here at Holy Spirit, of, no, let's invite this stranger back in. We've begun this conversation, but there's still more to be said. So let's invite him in. And then they see him in the breaking of the bread. They know who he is in the Eucharist. I love this year of these last few years of Eucharistic amazement, and what Bishop Cousins has helped really turn our gaze towards in looking at, in really focusing on the Eucharist, taking some time to say, let's go back and let's use this time and pool our resources, right? And really unify about what this looks like, and the gaps in our knowledge. I think that for me, I'm a practical person. I like being practical, right? But I can also ignore, like, let me go back. Hang on one second. I'm a practical person. So practically, what this has looked like for me in this year of Eucharistic amazement in the liturgy is to say, where are there places in the liturgy that I can be more reverent? Of those 4 pillars of Eucharistic amazement that Bishop Cousins has laid out. I don't pick the songs. I don't decorate the church, right? Those things are not under my order and dominion. But my posture and my posture and my reverence, those are. And so what are some things that I can do during the liturgy to help grow in greater reverence? Fortunately, in this parish, we're surrounded by so many beautiful witnesses, and my heart breaks sometimes during communion when I'm distracted in prayer and I look around and I see how reverent this parish is. And it can kind of be overwhelming. I'm getting kind of emotional. Like, it can be overwhelming and emotional to imagine this is a foretaste of heaven. And here are all of these souls going up to receive Jesus. And then after Mass, all of these souls glowing as tabernacles, right? And that I within 15 minutes, we can all be eating donuts together. But here in this moment of after receiving the Eucharist, is everyone as a tiny temple. Everyone is a tiny tabernacle. That's a powerful image for me. But taking time before Mass to know the readings, to meditate on the gospel, to hold my hands in a reverent posture. The Punswicks are not a timely people. And so it's helpful when we can get here early to get a good seat so that our littlest ones can see really what's happening up on the altar. I think that the most important thing for us, and has been kind of a game changer, has been this time of thanksgiving after the Eucharist. So after we've all received the Eucharist, some of the saints tell us that this is their favorite time to be with Jesus. And that this is, more importantly, this is Jesus's favorite time to be with us. And that's right after we've consumed him in the Eucharist. That if we're not careful, right? If we're not careful and we receive the Eucharist, we can just receive and then just walk back out and get in our car and be in the line, the drive-through line at McDonald's when like even just biologically, Jesus is still present in our bodies. We know that after we consume anything, it stays whole before the body begins to digest, right? Stays with us for about 10 minutes. And so that time of reception after receiving Jesus, that time, that space is so important. And as a family for several years now, after communion, after the final blessing, after the song, we kneel in a time of thanksgiving. I mean, it would be lovely if we could do it for 10 minutes. We don't always make that mark.